Hey, so um, on this issue for adding test sessions with the linked test cases, there's kind of this discussion going on about should we have separate list view, like placed in the application sidebar for the different types of issues, like test cases have their own down here, requirements have their own lists, issues have their own list. Should we keep going that direction where basically each type of issue gets its own list somewhere in the UI, or should we consolidate things down into a single list? I want to talk a little bit about where I see us hopefully eventually going and kind of just share my 2 cents so that we can all kind of collaborate on some of these ideas together. So right now today, we have different lists for each of these different types of issues. Eventually, requirements are being converted to a type of issue. We eventually want to get epics there too. Within each of these types of issues, we have certain features that are available that aren't in the other ones. For example, issues have iterations. Epics have like your epic tree component. Requirements have test reports. Sort of how I was thinking about this is decoupling some of these features into sort of standalone experiences that can be more or less effectively included in any type of issue. So if we were to take, for example, the test report that is on a requirement, this behavior more or less marks a requirement is satisfied or not satisfied according to pipeline results. It can be done manually, but if this was its own kind of standalone thing with its own data, how can we make it so that that could be included on any type of issue, not necessarily just a requirement? So if you look at all of the fields and apps and little kind of experiences we have across our different plan objects and kind of extracting those out into kind of standalone things that can be included in any type of issue. And then we have this idea of issue types. There's going to be some system defaults like incidents and test cases and test sessions and requirements, but eventually we want the user to be able to create whatever types of issues they want. And then we also have this idea of views. Right now we have like different, I guess, list views, but the way that I sort of think about it is a list is just one way to view the data. So if we sort of have a view app or some sort of standalone experience for listing issue types, for a board for visualizing types of issues, could also have a grid view. We have a timeline view, which is like a roadmap. We eventually want to have a calendar view. These are all just different ways to kind of segment and visualize what is this underlying data set of issue types. So the first thing that I would like to see us move towards, hopefully, is kind of decoupling things out and kind of sort of this way. But then eventually we get to the point where we can take more of a straightforward composition approach. Let's say for type A, we want to include a test report and maybe you want to include an iteration or health status, or for another type of issue, say we build a little whiteboard app that can be embedded in an issue type, for example, and maybe we want to have estimation turned on, which is weight. But ultimately, like we want these things to be flexible so that end users can kind of customize which fields and like apps and more or less things that they want to use on which type of issue and do it in a sort of a standardized, consistent way from a UX standpoint. But once we have like the ability to kind of compose some of these different fields and apps into these different types of issues, and it will be sort of like then building out this idea of a work item hierarchy, where I just call these human bar, but we sort of have kind of a parent-child relationship. We also sort of have this idea that I've kind of ripped off from a GitHub repo called multi-tree relationships. And so one thing can have multiple parents, and not just with issues themselves, but also some of these objects, right? So maybe like an issue can belong to more than one milestone in the future. Or maybe, we have multiple assignees now, but it's the idea of not limiting ourselves to just one hierarchical relationship, but spanning that. So in this case, we could have issue relationships that span work item hierarchies. We could have issues that span and belong to multiple groups or multiple projects. And we've been talking about that. But instead of having a single like hard-coded list view, the way that I've been thinking about this is almost like exposing saved views, where within that you can go in and kind of go in and customize what you want the view to be, whether it's a list or timeline or calendar, a board or a grid, or whatever other view types we add. And it basically like a saved view consists of like a work item hierarchy, maybe some save filters and some sorting that's saved there. But because it's just like a composed save view, you can delete it without losing any data. And this would kind of make it so that instead of like more or less eventually, like instead of having to navigate to groups and projects and then clicking on the view, we could have like a save view thing up here in the main header where you can basically just go to all of your views that you care about without having to navigate like this group project hierarchy. This sort of kind of falls in line also with eventually like consolidating and simplifying groups of projects where basically within each of these containers, you have different save views that also exist there, but can also be accessed in a more like kind of globally optimal way. So you don't have to do a bunch of navigation to get there. So in terms of like test cases having their own lists and requirements having their own lists, I'd almost like us to see move towards this like save view concept. And that way end users can almost customize how they interact with issues and types of issues based on the work that they're doing. And so somebody that's using requirements, for example, could create a save view that is all their requirements, right? Somebody who's using test cases and test sessions, they could have a save view that is just test cases and test sessions. You could create one that basically is for incidents, or you maybe figure out how to kind of mix and match some of these things. We can iterate on the UX for this and like how we accomplish this, but I don't necessarily see it as we have to duplicate the list view lots of places, because the list experience should be consistent everywhere we have a list experience that has types of issues on it. It also should be something that can be created and destroyed from like a list view standpoint, so that it can be kind of tailored to who's doing the work, which team is doing the work, and what they want to see and how they want to break down and organize that work within a particular view. So high level, sort of how I'm thinking about things now. I don't know how that informs the immediate next steps. It's something that I think we can collaborate on, but I just wanted to take a minute to share the thoughts that were in my head.